This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War, Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Jerry Pass, Hyannis Village Green Apartments.
Where and when were you born?
Excuse me. I was born in Boston, March 22nd, 1932. As a matter of fact, my mother's roommate was a niece of President Roosevelt's. So I was born next to President Roosevelt.
Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in a town west of Boston called Newton, Mass. But I didn't go to Newton High School. I went to Watertown High School, which was the next town over. It's very strange in those days how you paid taxes, and that's how you went, or where you went to school, where the front door was of your house. When I graduated there, I went up to Tilton Academy, up in Tilton, New Hampshire, and I graduated up there.
How did you end up on Cape Cod?
My folks were opening a restaurant down here, and I was a partner of my father's in a business. And we opened the business in 1963,
What was the business called?
Cape Dollarama, and it was on Main Street in Hyannis.
Is it still there today?
It's still there, but it's not the same name. It's been sold 3 or 4 times. It's now called, I think, the Daily Newspaper or something along that line. I don't remember.
Growing up, did you think you were going to join the military?
That's a good question. My father and cousins were all in the military during World War II. I joined the National Guard first in 1949, and I liked it, and so I joined.
If you didn't join the military, what other career would you like to have pursued?
I refereed professional hockey.
Really? How was that?
Oh, that was wonderful. I loved that.
Yeah, that seems.
My wife didn't like it because I was never home. I was traveling all the time with that. But I had a good career there. I have no complaints about that either. I was lucky that I was in the military and was able to do this too.
What year did you join the military?
1950.
What influenced you to be in the military?
I think maybe it was my father who influenced me because he loved the military, even though he didn't stay after the war was over. He was drafted in World War II, and he was married and had 2 sons. But we were just old enough to join at that time, otherwise probably I would have. But when I became of age, I joined the military.
What was it like having a father away, fighting in the war?
It was tough, not so much on my brother and I, but I think it was very difficult for my mother because they had a business. My father and mother had a business with my grandparents, and on my father's side, and my mother's kept the business going while my father was in the Army. And I think it was difficult because the hours were tough. It was also a restaurant in Newton, and it was a pub. And if you don't know what a pub is, it's a bar room as well as a restaurant. My mother was there from probably midday to closing. They used to close around midnight. So it was tough on my mother. Not my brother and I. We played baseball all the time. So.
How did your family react when you joined the military?
I don't know, because it was never negative. It was never negative. So, and that was good, because it kept my morale up, as long as nobody ever said, you know, why did you join this, or why did you do that, it just never did.
Did your brother go to war?
My brother joined the National Guard, but to answer your question, no. He joined the National Guard probably somewhere in the late 50s, and he went to basic training for 6 months. Then he came home as a civilian, because that's what they did in those days. But no, he never went, nobody ever shot at him.
Let's see. Can you describe a typical day in war?
Typical day in the war?
Yeah.
Yeah. You get up and got dressed and went down to the mess hall. What in those days was a tent. You walked into this big tent, and there was a truck, which was the kitchen, because everything had to be mobile. And you had breakfast with what they made. You didn't say, well, I wanted my eggs sunny side up, or I wanted scrambled eggs. If they gave you eggs and the chicken was still running, you ate the eggs, because either that or else you starved. Then from there you went to work. My job wasn't that hard, I don't think. I got in a Jeep and I drove around to make sure everything was okay, because I was in the MPs, which is the military police, which is the same as civilian police. And I went up in rank, so I ended up having a Jeep to ride around in instead of walking.
What time did you usually get up in the morning and go to bed at?
Oh, got up at 5:30 in the morning, every morning. Went to bed, for me, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, depending on what was going on, or what shift I was on. If I happened to pull the graveyard shift, as they call it, that was from midnight on until maybe 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And if you had the midday shift, well, that was like your home. You know, you go to work at, let's say 3 o'clock, and you were all through at 11 or 12. The day shift, that was always a good shift. That was morning from probably 6 o'clock in the morning until maybe 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. But that was a good shift, because you could go have your lunch and go have your dinner. And it was what you wanted. If you didn't, you shouldn't say what you wanted. It was never what you wanted. But as an example, I never ate ham before, because I'm Jewish, so we don't eat ham. But when I was in the service, and they gave you ham, you either ate it or you starved. You were hungry. We didn't have kosher foods, not in Korea anyway. And you ate what they gave you. So can't you tell? They ate what they gave me.
What rank did you start in, and then what rank
I
did
went
you end
in
in?
as a corporal, because I came from the National Guard. I got discharged from the National Guard, and I kept my rank as corporal. Then I went up to technical sergeant. It's called T/SGT. And if I stayed in longer than the 20 years, I probably would, today, I probably would have retired as a chief master sergeant. When my 20 years were up and I just ran. That was enough, I had enough at that time.
How many years did you serve for?
20,
What was it like to be a corporal?
what's that?
What was it like to be a corporal?
What was the rank to be a corporal?
What was it like being one?
Well, that was the beginning of non-commissioned officer. That was the beginning of it, the lowest. And you did the tasks of going around making sure everybody was dressed properly and they were on their stations where they were supposed to be. That was basically your job. And as you went up in rank, it became more and more work for you, because that's what you did. That's why you went up. In those days, in the Army, you didn't have to take a test in those days to go up. In the Air Force, when I went over to the Air Force, and if you wanted to go to sergeant or tech sergeant or something like that, you had to take a test. And I took the test, and I became a supervisor. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a supervisor. I didn't want to be the little guy on the bottom anymore. Not that I ever was, but I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to be the supervisor, so I became a supervisor.
When you first went to war, what was it like? What did you feel?
Very nervous. Very nervous getting off the landing craft. The landing craft is a boat, a ship that carries thousands of members of the service. And it goes up just so far, then the front of it drops down, and everybody goes out. And you don't know what's actually, you know the enemy was there, but you didn't know what they had. And then we would bring out the tanks, would come out of this same ship. The ship was very large, and it held everything under the sun. The only thing it didn't hold was aircraft. They just didn't do it. But everything else, it had trucks in there, it had tanks in there, and GIs. And we would go out. That was the landing at Incheon. And the boat, the LST, could not come in as close as we would like it to come in. It came in where we went out, we held the rifles in our hands up over our heads, and the water was up to here. And you ran as fast as you can in water up to here. And when you got to dry land, you fell on the land because people were shooting at you. They weren't shooting at me particularly, but they were shooting at people. They were just shooting. If the bullets hit you, it hit you. But it was very nerve-wracking. And any GI that tells you they're not scared going into that situation is telling a fib. Everybody's nervous. Your stomach is churning inside out. Your mind wanders at home. It also wanders, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get killed, or am I just going to get wounded? You don't know. But it's nerve-wracking.
How many countries did you visit?
I always was in the Far East, which is China, Japan, Korea. And that's where I spent a lot of time, was in Korea. I spent 4.5 years there.
It's a long time.
I stayed after the war too. After it was over, I stayed.
Why did you stay after the war?
Ask Uncle Sam. I don't know why I stayed, but I stayed. I had no choice. And I went to Japan a few times on rest and relaxation, and spent a lot of money over there.
What was your greatest accomplishment serving for our country?
I think the greatest accomplishment was when I saw the prisoners of war coming over the Freedom Bridge. That was something that probably the happiest moment at my life at that time. Happiest, of course, is coming home. I wasn't married at that time, and but that to me was the greatest. I loved watching all these guys, whether they were wounded, hurt, or could walk, coming across the bridge to our side of the country.
How was your life affected from the war?
I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know whether it changed me or it didn't change me. Certainly it changed a lot of guys. We didn't know about PDST or whatever it's called now. We didn't know about that in those days. You know, I guess guys would come home and they'd end up in military hospital somewhere because of a problem. But I guess I was very lucky. I never went to a military psychiatrist, or for that matter, a civilian. I guess my head was, as they say, screwed on right. I don't know.
What was the darkest, scariest moment that happened in the military?
The darkest moment was coming off the LST at Incheon. Didn't know. Again, didn't know whether I was going to get shot, wounded, or killed, or whether I'd get home alive. I didn't know. So that was always the darkest.
Did you ever come home how many times did you get to come home within the 20 years you served?
Overseas during the war, I never got home. I got home every night when I was stationed at Otis, because I lived in Hyannis. I was already married and had children by that time. And it was nice to come home. 1 week a month, I had to stay at Otis, because that was my week on. I was an investigator, so that was my week to be on. Other than that, I came home every night.
How many children do you have?
I have 3.
Were they born when you were overseas, or were
No,
they
I
just?
wasn't married.
Oh yeah.
I came home in February of 1954 and got married June 14th of 1954. I've been married to the same girl 65 years. Even though we're not together, not because anything happened. She's sick and she's in a nursing home. So
I'm sorry.
I live alone. Which is the darkest moment of my life, being alone.
Who was the most impressive person you met in the military, and why were they so impressive?
I had a 2-star general, 3-star general, 3 stars. He was a lieutenant general. His name was Ruffner, Rufner. And he always treated us like we were humans. He didn't scream, he asked, just the way I'm talking to you now, that's how he talked to everybody. get more done treating people that way than you do screaming and hollering at them. That was the Army. In the Air Force, I was friendly with a full colonel, and his name was Mickey Fisher. He was the wing commander at Otis. And when I wasn't on duty at Otis, I worked in a restaurant. And he would always come in the restaurant when I was there. And we'd sit down and we'd talk. And I never called him Mickey. Never. Always called him Colonel. But he called me Jerry. He was just a fine gentleman. And I loved working with him and for him. And there were times when I would be on patrol, I'd get a radio call to go to his house and pick him up. Because he liked to ride with the air police. And he would ride in the back seat, and I would be driving, and I'd have somebody else with me. And another policeman. And if we stopped the car and they gave us a hard time, especially if he was a commissioned officer, Colonel Fisher would step out of the car and go over and say, hey, listen, and give him the double, because they're screaming at us, and tell him to go back to his quarters and report to him the next day. And he took care of us. Now they call them security police, but those days they were called air police.
What was your closest experience to death, if you had one?
I never had one. Oh, yeah, there was one time in Korea. We were delivering ammunition to the front lines. And Korea's all hills. And I had what they call a 2.5-ton truck. And it was loaded right to the top with ammunition. And I went to put the brakes on and there was no brakes. There were no brakes. So in order to do anything, I had to downshift, which means coming from whatever I was in down to a lower gear, all the way down, and we had a clutch. And we pumped the clutch, and then we would get down. When we got to the bottom of that mountain, I was never so happy in my life. And the guy sitting up on top, he was riding what they call shotgun. He was watching if anybody tried to ambush us, and he would shoot at them. And the other guy sitting next to me would do the same thing. And I was driving. That was the worst experience I had, and the closest I think I came to whatever it is I was coming to. But I made it. Here I am.
Who were your closest friends during time serving?
Basically, the guys that I worked with in the section, we were close friends. But do I remember their names? No. It's been quite a few years since I've seen them. We didn't lose anybody, thank God. But I just don't remember their names.
Can you please define, in your own words, can you define a hero?
A hero? Certainly not me. Somebody who, in my opinion, gave up their lives for somebody else. I watch on TV once in a while, they'll give the Medal of Honor to somebody, and to me, that's a hero. Not necessarily because he got the Medal of Honor, but he did something that was outstanding, and that's a hero.
Do
I'm certainly not a hero.
Um, would you revisit some of the places you served in?
Do I visit them?
Okay. Would you revisit them if you got a chance to?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I missed out. I don't belong. I don't know why, but I just never belonged to any of the military organizations. Friend of mine who was in Korea, he was a friend because I met him in Florida back a few years ago when I lived in Florida. He belonged to the Korean War veterans of Hyannis, and all those guys were invited by the Korean government to be their guests, all expenses paid. And to this day, I kick myself because I never joined it. I could have gone back to Korea to visit. Would I love to go back? Yeah, sure. But circumstances are such now that I can't go back. Or I won't leave because of my wife.
Is there a favorite place of yours that you would go back if, like, any certain spot to that means something to you?
No.
Um,
I'd like to go back to Seoul because I remember. I'm saying I'd like to go back. I'm not sure I want to go back there. When I was there, Seoul was completely bombed out. And even though I lived at the university, which was, again, everything around us was bombed out. It wasn't a nice place as it is now, I guess. They tell me now, people who have gone back to Korea or Japan, they just say it's beautiful now. Korea is beautiful. I don't know.
what was it like to leave the war?
Sorry?
What was it like to leave the war?
I didn't leave the war. I was still there when the war ended. I left a couple of years later. So it was all, nobody was shooting, but we still carried guns.
When you came back home to the U.S., how was life in the U.S. like different from when you left before?
It wasn't that much different. It wasn't different. My hometown was still the same. The area I hung around with the guys was still the same. Everything, nothing changed. Still the same. Hyannis has changed. After 20 years of being away in Florida, I came back here. This has changed. Look, I don't know about anything on the Korea. They tell me that's changed. But do I want to go back? No. I'm not crazy about going back.
Have you lived anywhere else except for places like other than Massachusetts?
Yes.
Where?
I lived in New York and Florida.
Did you like living there?
Loved it.
Did you live there after the war or before? Or
Way after.
after?
Way after. 20 years ago, I moved to Florida.
I love Florida. It's
I
warm
loved
there.
it. I loved Florida. We would still be there. Circumstances were different.
Any other thing?
When I say circumstances are different, I don't mean monetarily. I'm talking about my wife that brought us back here.
How did you meet your wife?
On a blind date.
Really?
Yeah. A friend of mine, his girlfriend at the time, fixed me up with this girl. And I went out with this girl, and on the way home, I said to David, I'm going to marry her. And when I came back from overseas. We got married. That was 65 years ago, and we're still married.
Do you have any things?
And I have 3 children, and 5 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren.
Big family.
And it's wonderful. Except when we all get together, there's always one missing, and that's my wife. She's still around.
I think we're finished now.
You rolled through. Oh, I enjoyed this.
Me too.
This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you for having us over.
Anytime. Would you like hot chocolate or something?
I'm fine, thank you.